Thanks so much for having me, everybody. So this Johnny Cash film, just to give you a brief overview, I spent about a year and a half of my life working on it. At the time, I edited the film in Final Cut Pro 7, and it got me thinking now, just with all of the tools that are available for us, and this is just 5 years later, how much more I could have got done in the editing suite. This is using Premiere Pro and, of course, combining the new BCC 10. So this is some shots from the actual film. In fact, they're raw shots I dug up from an old drive that I had as working as co-editor on the film. And the first thing I wanted to introduce, this is June Carter, or she plays June Carter in the Johnny Cash documentary. And one thing, what we received was a bunch of flat footage from Technicolor at the time, who basically took the 35mm film and gave us 1920 by 1080 proxies. And one thing is the director wanted to do sometimes a little bit of beauty work. Sometimes it was isolated beauty work, sometimes it was just some general color correction on the whole shot. And it got me thinking, what would happen if I had BCC Beauty Studio combined with BCC 10? So let me, in my effects tab over here, I'm going to select BCC Beauty Studio, which I've already done a search for, and drop it on the first clip in my timeline. With my clip selected, I'm going to head over to Effect Controls. And something has already started to happen. This is really subtle here at first. If I sort of just click on the effects badge for Beauty Studio, there's a little bit of smoothing on her skin. But because her skin color is so close to the background colors and the actor's suit here, that it's affecting everything in the shot. So just to sort of do this, I'm going to jump into something called compare mode. I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison so you can first of all see the before and the after. And to see this even more clearly, I'm going to scroll down and turn on my video mask matte so you can see all of the pixels. The white ones are the ones that are being involved. Now I could take this and explore this further, but what I'm going to do is actually send this over to Mocha and isolate her face directly from Premiere Pro, which is just a really cool thing. I'm going to turn this off, scroll down, and click the little Mocha badge. Wham! Right of a sudden I'm in Mocha and I can do some planar tracking here. If you're new to Mocha, it's really simple to get up and running. And one thing I'm going to use is an X-spline. There's this tool up here. I'm just going to draw a mask around her face. So I'm going to click on this button and start to draw a rough mask. I don't have to be too specific in this example because there are actually two masks kind of at work here. One is a color mask that's sort of isolating certain pigments of the skin. The other is now this shape mask, which I've just double-clicked to close. I'll quickly select this and show you that you can take these points and drag them in to smooth them out, or drag them outward as if they were corners. I'll just drag them in. Drawing your attention down here, we can see a couple things at play. One is what we're going to track. By default, it's set to translation, scale, rotation, and shear. You can add or take away from this depending on what you're looking to track in your footage. We also can see that we're going to be tracking large motion, which is going to be the majority of shots that you track. And we can see that right now, the input channel is set to luminance, and the amount of pixels used is currently 30%. Now, you can drag this amount up for a more accurate track. However, keep in mind that's going to be at the expense of more time. I am comfortable with the default settings. So what I'm going to do is simply click this track forward button. We'll see that that holds up quite nicely around June's face. And the great part is when I save this out and go back into Premiere Pro, the combination of the color mask, that is the Beauty Studio, and we'll see in a second the colors that it's using for the skin, combined with the shape mask here, this is a planar tracker, or planar tracker I should say, as in rather than being a point tracker, this was tracking the overall texture. So let me close this out, save it, and right now I'm in Premiere Pro. So let's just take a look at the difference between the matte right now. If I click on the matte button, notice that it's now isolated to June's face. If I scroll down here to the pixel chooser under Mocha, and we take a look at the matte, I have a series of controls that I can use. First of all, they show you the two colors that are sampled. But I can come down here to the hue softness, the saturation, and additional controls to smooth out my mask. In fact, I can choke it, and I can blur it further as well. Really, really cool. I'm going to scroll back up. Okay, I'm going to turn my view mask off. I just want to go over here to a little bit of the color correction that's available. So you'll see here, I can turn color correction on. I'm going to give that a click. I'm going to hit the disclosure triangle next to the color correction. I'm going to make sure that I use the current mask that's selected. That's the mask that I tracked inside or used inside of Mocha. Once I do, and apply a little bit of a saturation adjustment, I'm just going to boost this up quite a bit at first, just so that you can see it. And I'm going to pull back down on it. So that's at 51%. Here's a subtle adjustment at 10. You can go even lower than that. Go down a bit into the pixel chooser and think about also feathering the mask. And you're all set. And this is just a combination of using a BCC 10 effect along with using Mocha directly inside of Premiere Pro. Right? Just really saves you time in your workflow. Let's move on to the next effect. I'm going to go over here into something that would have been the biggest time saver in my documentary. It's called Reframer. One of the things of working in a documentary is that we just had a ton of vertical photos. And the director at the time really didn't like showing any photo on the screen with any black whatsoever. He refused it. So either we put a background plate here, and then, or we basically blew up the image to the full size and did a little bit of a Ken Burns movement. This we want to think about also in terms of today what people get is a lot of vertical footage from cell phones. So this is how this actual plugin took up Reframer, is that people or broadcasters receive a bunch of footage from cell phones and they need a quick solution so there's no black borders here at the side. This is the solution. I'm going to hop in here and type in the word Reframer. This is in my effect controls. You can see my BCC Reframer, and I'm going to drop it on some black video on my V1 track. If I turn above my V2 layer, we'll see I get this option which says apply Reframer to a project size solid and use source layer to select input. So I'm going to go into my effect controls and I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to hop into foreground setup. The source layer I want to choose happens to be on V2. So I'll select that. And all of a sudden I have my original clip plus a background plate there for me. And for this price of admission, the amount of time it would have saved me on the documentary is quite amazing. But let's jump inside and see if some of the other options that are available to us. So under the foreground setup, we can play around with the general sizing of both our foreground and background clips, rotation, scale, and so forth. I'm going to jump into foreground transformations. We can see additional effects that we can do just on the foreground layer. But where things get really interesting is in foreground effects. First thing I'm going to do is under foreground effects, turn on blend edges. You can see that the foreground image is blending into the background quite nicely. I can up the blend amount. I can also play independently with the blend width and the blend height. Scrolling my way down a little bit further, we have options for color correction for just the foreground layer. I'm going to give this a click. I'm going to turn it on. I can play with maybe the hue of the foreground shot there. Maybe up the brightness just a little bit and increase the contrast of that above image. Now, these same controls exist for background. So we've got a background setup where we can continue to use the source that we have or choose another source. If you see here from the drop-down, an alternate source. We have options for how this background layer is going to fit into our shot. So we can scale it, we can stretch to fit, and one of my favorites, which is a mirror-based effect where we actually get, well, there's 3 images or background images of Johnny Cash right now that we can see. We can choose to flip just one or both of them. I'm going to hop into my background effects, just play with that a little bit to see that besides all of those color correction effects that we have an additional background tint. So if I give that a click, now my background is tinted. I can play around with that tint amount. So there's a subtle variation in color correction between the 2 images to stick the above image here. And just think about this not in terms of just photos, right? Vertical photos that just don't fit the frame of HD video or 4K video, but think about this in terms of just cell phone footage. Here's a quick solution to get you up and running, and you don't have to go through the tedious task of duplicating files inside your project panel. I think it's just a really cool effect. Now, I'm going to hop on to BCC 10's Remover. So this is basically a clone stamp tool that you can use directly inside of Premiere Pro. Same thing, I have my project set up here, and just to stage this scene, this is a letter that June Carter is currently writing to Saul Holliff. That's Johnny Cash's second manager, who actually lived in London, Ontario at the time. I remember the director telling me, you know, I really find this one spot annoying, and I would really like you to remove it quickly. At the time, I'm like, well, you know, it's going to take me about 15 minutes to do. I got to hop outside of the software and either perform this task in After Effects and less time for the edit, or go inside another program. And just for me to think about that I could do this inside here with that additional plugin with Boris is just great. So let me do a search here for the remover. I'm going to take that remover effect and I'm going to drag it onto the clip in my timeline, and I get two things that are visible in my program monitor, but I can't quite see them, so I'm going to click on the BCC 10 remover name, and I'll see that I have a source and a destination. A source is what we are going to stamp from or clone from, and I set that to be this area right over here just above the shadows. And the destination happens to be where I want to send that clone source to, which happens to be this area over here. Okay, I can go to the beginning just to make that a bit more accurate. And now I'm going to fool around with the clone itself. So in my effect controls, under the clone parameters, I'm going to increase the radius of the destination side, so you can see that increasing. And so it's not so harsh around the edges, I'm going to increase the feathering. And already that's quite nice. If the area or the source that you're happening to clone from the area doesn't seem to be enough, there's an effect here where you can actually scale up the area that you're cloning, which is just a really nice feature, just in case there's not enough room on either end of the clone source that you're grabbing. Really cool. And that's just off the bat. And if I play this, there's a lot of shakiness to the shot. I might be able to get away with just as is, but if, let's say the director was being overly picky that day, I want to show you that, again, this is another BCC 10 effect where we can use mocha integration. So instead of a removal method being a clone spot, I want to choose a clone shape. You'll see that I have to scroll down, and right on the screen it's telling me what I need to do. I need to choose Pixel Chooser. I've got to turn it on. I've got to launch mocha. Here's that shot loaded up. I'll quickly, on the first frame of my project, click on the X-spline tool and just draw an area to track through planar tracking. Just select that all, maybe fine-tune those points, and with the default settings here, give this a quick track. See how this does. Once we save this out, again, this new data that I've got from Mocha directly inside of Premiere Pro is going to be applied to the clone effect. And I've done this in a couple minutes. This doesn't take me 5 minutes or 10 minutes anymore. It literally takes me a couple minutes to make small solutions to problems that occur all the time on film shoots. And this is where I think it's amazing to see where that technology is heading. There's that track finished. I'll save it out. We can see the end result. So it is holding up the track. Now I need to just quickly go into the Mocha Pixel Chooser and do a few things. I'm going to hop into the mask and just increase the feather, just because I'm using a different source right now. And the other thing is this offset tool that's come available to me, where I can make sure that the source that I'm defining in order to remove is accurate. And by playing around with this a little bit more, I can get exactly where I need to be with that shot. So something to definitely check out, Remover, and see how it can work for your workflows. And you can just sort of see here just this rough example of how that's holding up in my shot. Cool. Next, we're going to move on to video glitch, another cool effect in terms of the BCC 10 library. So I got some footage here of Johnny Cash And a lot of the times we had footage that, of course, wasn't of quality, so we did little things like threw them into television screens, other things like have different backgrounds, like which you can do with Reframer and so forth. But here, there's some this is just great. So glitch is basically creates damaged video for you automatically. So let me just type in the word glitch. I'm going to throw video glitch on this Johnny Cash clip. And we see right away, if I start to scrub my playhead, the sort of damage that's created on top. And the damage consists of a couple things: glitch intensity, we've got a shake, we've got block damage, etc. Another thing that BCC 10 filters or plugins include, and this is great, is first of all, if I select the word, you've got on-screen controls. So I can play here with glitch intensity. I can play here with other parameters, such as the flicker intensity, to bring that up, and just sort of fine-tune the most used parameters of an effect directly on the screen. And if I'm just getting started with an effect, another thing I can do is launch something called the effects browser. The effects browser contains presets of an effect to give you a sense for what it does. You'll see here on my top left-hand corner, I've got different types of video glitch available for me, or so if I keep on clicking, in fact, I can use my arrow tools. I've landed on shake with motion blur. I can hit play and get a sense for previewing that effect and what it does. And right now I have some just nice damage done right here to my video, containing several elements. Or I could go on screen and adjust these. Of course, I can apply a given effect. I'll just go back to the default. I'll just apply that to the clip. And you can see there that it's adjusted there on the timeline, ready to go. Taking another look at video glitch, I'm just going to go to this other shot. It's the same Johnny Cash shot. It's just in a television screen. And I'm going to apply video glitch again, just to this scaled down shot. I want to bring your attention to the bottom of the effect, where there's another cool parameter. The parameter is called beat reactor. The idea is I can take up to 3 parameters on the video glitch effect, right, to control through music. The catch is the music has to be an external .aif file. I've got that set up, so let me click to first of all enable beat reactor. I'm going to go here to my V2 track and just turn it off so we can see it says no external media file has been selected. Please select one. So let's go ahead and do that. Under beat reactor, scroll down so you guys can see. Under the external file here, I'm going to load an external .aif file, the Big River audio. I'm going to choose open. We see here the shot, but more importantly, we also see a graph, an audio graph that shows us the beats of the audio. This is our great start. So what I want to do now is decide under the beat reactor is which parameters I want to use or what I want to become affected. So I'm going to go over, instead of unused, I'm going to choose shake, group intensity. And just so that you guys can see this clearly, I'm going to go up. I'm going to turn off a few things so we just focus on that one effect. So I'm going to turn off block damage, enable shift, and then you can see here shift enable shake. I'll turn off flicker as well. So here's my graph, and what I want to do is just control which part of the waveform I affect. If I scroll up to the top, this is after I've selected the parameter, I now get 2 controls, one for the sampling region that I want to affect. So I'm going to drag one and highlight this yellow area here, the yellow portion of my graph. You can see that that is what's going to be involved in the selection, and this is what's going to affect and drive the shake effect there in the TV. Scrolling down, it might not be good for us to show the graph at the end. So let me just go down to my show graph setting and choose to show it off. And another thing just to mention is under the parameters, if I look at the shake group intensity I've applied, we can control its output minimum and output maximum range. Drag it higher or lower, and that is going to drive, as you can see, the shake based on the audio beats that I have selected. Just a great effect. And this also carries on to the next effect that I'm going to present to you guys, which happens to be light leaks. So light leaks, just keep in mind. Here's some concert footage from the Johnny Cash film. This was stock footage that we got from Sony at the time and was used in the opening sequence of the film. So one of the things I was thinking to myself was we had some transitional effects. We actually used Boris transitions at the time in Final Cut Pro, but they have this great effect called light leaks, and we could have actually create these sort of spotlight effects over the audience using this effect. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to move from glitch over to light leaks. I'm going to select BCC light leaks, apply it to the first clip in my timeline, and automatically I get this sort of simulated light leak effect. I want to drive the point home about using the effect browser. So again, here's just sort of the default settings, but to get an idea of what this plugin does, there are a ton of light leak presets available through the effect browser. I can use my arrow keys again to select one that I think would work with this footage. So some of them may be too strong, but we have control over all of the parameters inside of Premiere Pro once we go back. I'll just select one of these as a preset. You could always play it here again just to double check. Once I'm satisfied, I will apply this onto the first clip. This particular light leak consists of two generated light leak effects, generator 1, generator 2. You can have up to 4. And if you're looking for the individual parameters, we can hop into the generator. But also I can look at the general overall style of the light leak. So if the opacity is too strong, I can bring down the opacity of the overall light leak. I can play with its exposure, shift the hue and saturation, as well as play with some animated or pre-animated effects such as flicker amount. So basically I can increase the flicker speed. So if I select my clip in the timeline and hit X just to draw a range, and on my Mac hit Option K to play back the effect, we can see how quickly that light is flickering across our footage. Want something a bit more subtle, go into the flicker speed. I'll bring this down to something like 10, as in it doesn't really call for an overall huge flicker in this particular shot. Another thing I like under these parameters is something called texture mutation rate, which is really how it moves from one light source to another. You can see it kind of mutates from one to another. If we want something a bit more subtle, I'll simply drag down this amount to something like 20, hit Option K. We can see that sort of subtle or much more subtle effect on our clip. Besides the overall stylistic properties, again, we have control over each of the generators that this light leak is built of. If I go to the generator 1, I'll see that I have controls for the position, the rotation, the color, and the scale of the light leak. Now, it's definitely worth mentioning that both the video glitch and the light leaks are also available as transitions. So not only can I apply it over the clip itself, but as a transition in between two clips, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So when I did the search for light leak, you'll see here in my BCC 10 transitions category, there's my BCC light leaks dissolve. Let me select that transition and drag it onto my timeline, centering it over the second and third edit. We can see here, this is the default transition. Not too happy with it, so I'm going to select it. I'm going to jump over into my effects browser. There we can see, just sort of previewing some, but I really like that kind of large light leak white only for this particular example. And I'm going to apply it. It's applied over my clip, but way too strong. So let me hop into that Stylize category again and bring the opacity down of the overall light leak. I'm going to now select the BCC light leaks dissolve by its name, and we see the on-screen controls for this transition, and there's quite a few. So the most used parameters, such as the scale of the light leak, you can use. But you also have easing values for the transition to get you of how you want to transition from one clip to another. So you've got your ease in and your ease out down here on the lower left and the lower right. So I can simply click on that and increase the easiness values. I then have an ease mid here at the top that I can also control. all on screen in my program monitor. All I have to do is select the BCC Lightly Dissolve in order to do that. I'm going to move my playhead just a little bit before, preview the transition, maybe make it a little bit longer, and then just tweak this a little bit further if I wanted to cover a wider range over the shot. But both this light leaks transition and the video glitch, keep in mind that they're versatile in the fact that they can be applied as an effect or a transition using BCC 10. Provides quite a bit of flexibility in your projects. Okay, now I'm going to hop over to something called Pixel Chooser. And if I had this back during the project, this would have saved me a ton or allowed me to do a lot more things within the project. Now, this is always a balance for me as an editor, whether I work on a feature film like I did in this case, or I even work in advertising. So my thing is, well, I have to edit, but how much extra do I do? What I mean by that is, what extra things do I do besides not handing, let's say, to a VFX artist? Anything that's small. I remember Tal, a gentleman who did a webinar for Boris a while back, had this rule. I think it was, he called it the 5-minute rule, and it really stuck to me. It was the idea if you could do something within 5 minutes that would give your client a little bit more value and also made you look better as an editor, why not do it? And this is the whole thing about plugins and technology using Premiere, is that you're able to do so much more things in like 5 to 10 minutes that would have taken you ages a long time ago. By ages, I really mean 20 minutes, but ages beating that 20 minutes is a lot of time. So here's one of these examples. Here I have a shot. It's Saul Holleth, and he's getting some bad news about Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash was arrested, is the newscast at the time. This is footage that we reenacted in studio. And one thing is, the director was like, can you really quickly solve this problem when Saul's hand goes in front of the TV monitor? I just want it to look good. And I was like, at the time, in trying to do this in the older editing application, it would have taken me a lot of time. But here, inside of BCC 10, it takes me very little time. So I wanted to show you how this was set up. First of all, I've got my base clip. Let me just turn off. So that's just the TV content. I sent the part of the clip here, the mask, which is, it was sent over to After Effects as a dynamic link file, and I quickly just masked out the screen and then duplicated the layer and applied just a little bit of a television overlay to blend it into the scene. And this is what I was left with, which is, of course, the clip, but then Saul's arm kind of goes over top of it. So I used an effect called BCC Pixel Chooser to solve this, and this is the end result. Is I was able to select this effect. It's actually already on the clip. You can see it's called BCC Pixel Chooser. It allows us to basically send something over to Mocha, track it, and then keep those selected pixels. So I just want to give you an example of how this looks. I'm going to click on Mocha here. And you'll see that this project consists of 2 layers. Let me just kind of scroll here so we can see the shot to attract the 2 different planes on the screen. And I keyframe this just because of the movement in order to get this, but was able to track this footage out inside of Premiere. I had the above layer, which just had his arm. So in fact, if I turn off the V1 and the V2 track, it's just his arm selection here. And I blended them together. And I think the most important thing is that I did this in under 10 minutes. So to think about doing this as an editor, taking an effect, sending it over into Mocha for a quick track, or even in some cases, some very basic keyframing in terms of rotoing, having it update there in your Premiere Pro timeline is an extremely powerful tool as a video editor. And that's how I sort of combined for this shot, re-envisioning doing this now in Premiere Pro. Let's hop over into another very exciting feature called Title Studio. Title Studio has a bunch of great things to it, and one thing is it allows us, first of all, to create 3D extruded text directly inside of Premiere Pro. It also allows us to import Cinema 4D models, or actually .c4d files, directly inside of Premiere Pro. I want to hop over to the last clip here in the timeline some really simple text of a cache logo, and I created basically a video fly-in within about 5 minutes, and wanted to start with this project and then dive into creating a lower third, which I'm going to call dynamic because we can stretch it out to any duration that we want it to, and it basically has a intro and outro animation. But let's just start to take a look at this beautiful BCC Title Studio. So I'm going to select that clip. You can see it's already applied onto some black video in Premiere Pro. And to hop inside of it now, there's this little setup button. It's going to hop me inside and give me a preview of creating titles within here. The idea of Title Studio is that, first of all, we've got an area up here. We can call this where we can control all the various aspects of a selected item from our layer panel or our timeline down here. We've also got the area of the composite window where we can see the overall animation. You can see a bunch of controls down here for adding keyframes or playing back your project, turning keyframes or on or off or manipulating them. Now, even more so here in Title Studio is everything, when you create it, gets thrown into something called a 3D container. What's interesting about a 3D container is we can consider it like a group, but it contains a bunch of stuff right away. It contains cameras, it contains lights. We can really set up a full dynamic environment, not only with text, but we can create shapes as well. So you can create spheres, you can create lower third backgrounds. It's designed to create titles and even import those Cinema 4D files. So let's just take a look at the project. First of all, the text that was created. In fact, it's called cache. And when text is created, we have an area up here. And for anyone who's ever worked with an older video editing application, this is going to be very familiar to you, the Boris text interface. So I can type text in this upper area right here. I can choose from a variety of fonts that are loaded on my system. I can play with all different types of values, such as bolding my text, increasing the tracking, the kerning, or the leading, and really fool around with some basic properties directly in this panel. I also have another panel here specifically for 3D, which is for fill styles and so forth. And another thing that I find interesting is, with the text selected, is this area here called material styles. Now this might not show as material styles at first. In fact, if I go to the window menu, there are several different views. There's text styles. So this is the style of your, or presets for the style of your 3D text. We've got also a bunch of extrusion styles. So the style of the actual extrusion on the text itself, as well as material styles, so a bunch of presets for materials that you can throw or place on your text simply by double-clicking each of these values. In fact, if I double-click the brushed red, you can see the text updates. I'll hit Command-Z to undo that. You can also click another one, or choose certain textures that actually contain bumps or reflections to really create some nice-looking text within your project. So this text, not only do you have the ability to change it and switch it, but of course we can animate various transformation properties of the text. So this would go under controls. And some of these animations I'm going to get into a little bit later. These are automatic animations. So I adjust the value and I have an automatic sort of animation with my text without necessarily the need to keyframe that much. I'm going to hop over here to the scene container, which is also a very powerful thing. So this is where the text is saved out to. In the scene container, what's great about it is it contains a camera. As you can see, there's a camera in my scene. And if I scrub my playhead here back to the beginning, there's an animation with the camera that takes place on the camera Z's parameter. So I added a few keyframes to get this simple dolly move of my text and chose to ease this text in. Another thing that's great about the scene container for 3D is that you can have up to 3 lights to work with on your text. In this scene, I have approximately 3. They're all point lights. I have nothing against spotlights, which are also available to you. But you have between a point and a spot. I just find sometimes point lights a little bit quicker to work with when on design. So I've got 3 point lights at various places within my composite, brightening up the text. And all these values that you see for these 3 automatic lights, as well as the animation for the camera, they're all animatable here within the 3D scene container. So this is some of the power of like working with, let's say, 3D objects. But I wanted to give you a practical example of what happens in a documentary. So one scene, let me just hop out of Title Studio and hop to this first clip here. in my Title Studio sequence. I'm going to hit the equal key to zoom in. In this particular scene in the Johnny Cash film, it's him sort of driving drunk on the road on his way to Tennessee at the time. And we're playing back an audio diary from Saul Holliff. The idea was we would type the text on the screen for 3 seconds, and then we would have to fade it out. And there were 20 variations of this text. And I did it all manually at the time inside the Edit suite. I had to type on effects, and then I had to keyframe a fade out to the text itself. And it took a while because you're doing it 20 times. But coming to think about using Title Studio, we have a couple great advantages that make working with very simple lower thirds quite effective. So I'm going to go over into my Effects tab. Sorry, I'm going to go into my Project panel first and create some black video. Hit OK. Just to keep track of everything, I'm going to call this black video Title Studio. Okay. I'm going to take it, drag it onto my V2 track, extend it outward. Now it definitely covers my video, but the minute I take my effect and throw on Title Studio, we'll see that it's going to launch Title Studio from scratch. By default, I get a 3D container and some default Boris 3D text ready for me to work with. In fact, if I take this text just for you temporarily, I'll just grab a value to show you that that's real 3D extrusion. You've got a full-on studio to work with. For this example, I don't need 3D text, so I'm going to select the scene 3D container and I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to go here and create just a basic title container for 2D text. Inside the group or the container which is going to have the title, I'm going to create some flat-based text where I get a basic flat-based Boris effects. The fact that there's several words to this, I'm first of all going to select this, and I consider myself to be a lazy editor. What I mean by that is if I can do something in 1 step instead of 2 steps, I am all for it. It's going to save you time down the pipeline. So I've saved some of these text elements to Word documents in a simple .txt file. I'm going to load them in to the Boris Effects editor right now. There's a button here to import a file. It takes basic.txt files. You'll see here this is one of the lines from the film. So Sunday, March 21st, we see that line. I'm going to select that file. I'm going to just choose Open, and it's all of a sudden copied. There's a few small mistakes, but I'm just going to quickly add some periods, some quotations, a period to finish that off, and that's already loaded into the Title Studio. We'll just add another delete here. So there's my text. It's all loaded up. Now I could go into the text controls and just decide on the position of where I want it on the screen. I'm going to lower it also in the y-axis. Maybe decrease the scale. These controls are also available for you in Premiere Pro, so you don't have to do it here. I'm just getting a general setup of where I want it. To make sure I'm within Title Safe, I'll change the display to the Title Safe view. By the way, up here you've got not only controls for Title Safe and Grid, you can actually play around with different views of camera when working in 3D environments. So let's talk out the animation that I want to do. I want to do a type on at the beginning and a fade out at the end. So for the type on at the beginning, let me hop into my list down here. There's an area called Material Flat Texture. And here are some automatic ways of animating your text, but I'm going to go straight to the type on parameters. All animations by default are set to constant, which means they're not meant to animate on screen. But this little square button gives me access to switch, from none to another animation besides constant, such as linear or ease in, ease out, which will create some animation once I simply switch a value under text type on. So if I change that from 100 to 0, you'll see that my text has disappeared here in my screen. And if I move my playhead throughout the project, my text is being typed on from the beginning to the end. That's not what I want. So I'm going to jump to about the 2-second mark here in my timeline. I'm going to change the text type on value to 100. And there is a nice little text type on right there in Title Studio. So now just for the simple fade out. And then the magic. So the fade out here, I just want it to take place over a second here at the end of the video. I'm going to hop into my scene title container over to the position controls where there is an opacity control. I'm making sure to do it to the title container rather than the text itself in case I decide to switch this out later. The keyframe parameters of the title container will just carry over if I make any variations to this text. So I'm going to click here, make sure my keyframing is set to ease in, ease out. I want the opacity at this point in time to be 100. Let me move my playhead to the end of the timeline, click on the last keyframe, and bring the opacity value here down to 0. Now I have my animation. I want to be able to use this 19 times, like I said. The problem is if I bring this into Premiere and then make multiple reiterations of it and start to stretch it out if it was a little bit longer for the next shot, the animation would also extend in life. So if I extended this clip that has to, or this title clip that happens to be 7 seconds long to 14 seconds, I would then have a 4-second type-on animation and a 2-second fade-out animation. I don't want that. I want to basically define here an area of where my title, the part of the title that I want to stretch out, but preserve the animation timing. So I'm going to create something called a rigid run here in my timeline. I'm going to control-click. Sorry. And I'm going to choose to add something called a rigid run. This area defines the area that you want to preserve. So I need 2 for this case. I'm going to drag 1 over here to be the length of my first animation. So I want this area right here, this black area, is defined as what I want to preserve. I want to scroll my playhead here to the end of the timeline. I'm going to just create or control-click to add another rigid run. So there it is. I can stretch this out if I need it to be any longer. You can see I've defined the areas of the animation that I want to preserve. And here in the middle is the area that I can just keep or stretch out to my heart's content. Let me click Apply. We're back into our project. And just let's look at this animation so we can see it over the text. If I needed to make additional adjustments here, I've got transformation controls here that I can use for the Title Studio. So I've got my text. You can see the type on and the fade out looking great. Now I want to make another reiteration of it. So I'm going to option click to make a copy. I'm going to move my playhead to right where the animation ends. This is at 12 seconds and 7 frames at this time. I'm going to stretch this title out. So I'm stretching it out just to show you that the animation length is preserved. Option click, Command C, Command V to copy and paste, maybe select Title Studio, go back inside of it with my text selected, go to the text tab with the selected text, highlight it, maybe load another piece of text, maybe write it. I've got a second .txt document here ready to go. I'll hit open, and let me just move to a place where you guys can actually see this because I'm on a frame right before the animation starts. So that text does exist, don't worry. And make a couple changes, spread out these lines, second text template, hit apply. Animation preserved, can continue to make those changes over and over again because I set up a Title Studio template. The better part is just keep in mind that all of these Title Studio effects, if you hop inside and you hit File, Save, you can also save out this Title Studio file for another application, if need be, that plays with BCC 10. And that is pretty much some things inside of my Johnny Cash film on using the new BCC 10 with all of those effects combined with Mocha that just saved me a lot of time, or I envisioned saving me a lot of time with my workflow, using that as well as just the great features that are in Premiere Pro, such as importing and exporting. So that's it for my presentation. I hope that is informative. I hope I'm not ending too early, but I think there's time for a raffle here that's coming up, as well as hopefully some questions too that we can get answered.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and let anybody ask any questions that they want to ask for you for a couple of minutes before we wrap up and announce the raffle winners. Is there anything that somebody really wants to ask Nick about his presentation? And we'll look in the questions panel for your answers, or your questions, excuse me, and then we'll give you the answers. I'm hilarious sometimes, I guess. Okay, so thank you so much for your presentation. It was really good. I'm not seeing a lot of questions, so I'm going to just banter with you until somebody asks something for the next minute and a half, and then we're going to move on to the raffle.
Cool.
Do you now, as far as your work goes, do you find that Boris Effects is something that really increases your workflow? Do you find that this is something that that helps you get your job done quickly?
Yes. So I mean, when it again, if I was just going back to a rule, you know, I have to edit a full project, and I try to add motion graphics. This is more, I'm talking on the advertising side, and there are just some effects that I think are great. So we're talking about the idea of just having mocha tracking inside of Premiere. That's a very cool thing to have, and it just has me thinking more and more now, how can I use this in a great and efficient way in my future projects? So
yeah,
there's that, and I love your effects browser. I know it's just like this thing where you go to and you see all these variations of effects, but to me that's gold. It's like to have a preset, to be able to see what an effect can do rather than just a list of parameters listed there is huge, right? Because like sometimes I think people go into effects and they're like, well, what the heck does this do? But to see variations of that, I think can really help guide people around. So that's another feature. And as I mentioned, this title studio thing, as much as it was a simple example, it's a huge time saver to have a piece of text that you can stretch out to any length infinitely, right, and be able to repurpose or a bunch of different lower thirds. So I hope that answers your question, Mary.
Yeah, I think it does. As far as the questions that were being asked, it looks like a lot of these are just sales questions and stuff that our marketing team can answer. So thank you so much for your time. We're going to go ahead and announce the raffle winners. So we have a couple of winners who won the Adobe Creative Cloud. There were 3 copies that were being given away generously by Adobe, and it looks like the Adobe Creative Cloud winners are Ruben Hill, Tina Lee, and Zachary Trenta, and we're going to be contacting you after this webinar to get you your licenses. We have a Mocha Pro winner. The Mocha Pro winner was Aaron Zuber. Thank you so much for tuning in. And the BCC 10 winner is Adina Morando. So thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you so much, Nick, for your presentation. You were wonderful. Thank you, Eric, for tuning in from Adobe and answering everybody's questions. And Peter has been your Boris Effects product manager, answering all your questions. I'm Mary Poplin with Boris Effects and Imagine Your Systems. Thanks, guys, so much, and have a wonderful day.